We have another speaker ready to go. I think Jim Euchner is going to give us lots of great impressions from Goodyear. He's been a longtime veteran of innovation at a couple companies, and I'll leave it to you, Jim, to kick things off.
Okay, is the microphone on? I was reminded when I saw Luis's picture of the kids talking about innovation of when my son was about that age, and I was working at Pitney Bowes at the time, and he asked me for the first time, so Dad, what is it that you do for a living? And I told him, you know, it's I manage innovation at Pitney Bowes, and we make postage meters, and you know, they put postage on an envelope, and I started explaining if you have an envelope and it doesn't have a stamp, it has a little red symbol, and he said, all right, I get it. So his enthusiasm for innovation wasn't quite as high as the level of the kids in that video there. I'm gonna start today. I'm really talking about culture of innovation, and innovation as change management. And I'm going to start just with a parable that everybody's probably familiar with, the parable of the soil. And it's about a sower who went out to sow his seed, and some of the seed fell on a path, and it just got trampled, and birds ate it up, and that was that. And some of the seeds fell among thorns, and the thorn grew up with the seed and choked it, and it died. And some of the seed fell in rocky soil, which wasn't deep or very fertile, and it sprouted and began to bloom, but then it withered for lack of moisture. And only some of the seed fell in good soil and grew and produced 100-fold, it says in the parable. I think that's sort of, it's a parable about many things, but it's partly a parable about innovation. You think about an innovation manager goes out to sow his ideas, and some of them fall on the path, and the path is one that the company really doesn't feel it needs to trot on yet, and they get trampled. And others fall among the thorns of internal politics, where the organization hasn't been prepared to nurture the ideas, and they get choked at various stages. And some fall in the rocky soil, which is off the strategies, just not strategically important to the company. And those may sprout, but they die, they wither from lack of soil. It's only a few that sprout and grow. Now, sometimes people look at that parable and they'll think, yeah, so that means you have to do a lot of innovation, and some of the ideas will succeed and others won't. But I think it's really more a parable of what you need to do. What you need to do is not so much about the ideas as it is about the soil. It's about tilling and preparing and managing the soil. And I think companies that innovate well are often the ones who do that, who have prepared the soil, prepared the organization for the kinds of innovation that might be needed. I'm going to talk just as an introduction about a culture of innovation, because I think people throw the term around a lot, and there are a lot of attributes that people assign to a culture of innovation, like 15% time, or tolerating failure, or rewarding innovators, or providing resources, or great processes and tools. But I think a culture of innovation is really about creating a place where it's possible for something new to happen, and that's not all the places on the planet. It's more about creating, again, the soil so that good ideas can bloom. Now, the degree to which the soil needs to be prepared depends on the type of innovation that you're trying to do. I've divided, for my purposes, innovation into two types. Innovation that feeds the existing profit engine, and innovation that creates a new profit engine. And the innovation that feeds the existing profit engine, the soil is already tilled. In fact, the mechanisms are in place to move things forward. Most process innovation falls into this category. Faster, better, cheaper, making something tires, for example, faster or better along some dimension, or cheaper, or incrementally augmenting a product. If you're going to start to create new business models, they're going to rub up against the existing performance engine, as Govindarajan calls it. If you're going to try to create new businesses that leverage the assets of the corporation, they're probably going to crash up against someone else who wants to leverage those assets, or different ways of thinking. So I think when we're looking at it, we need to decide which kind of innovation we're focused on, and then we can understand the degree and the ways in which we need to till the soil. My job at Goodyear is in the second category. Goodyear's a very innovative company in tires, and we make tires for passenger cars, high performance, lower performance. We make them for commercial vehicles. We make farm tires. We make tires for mining and other off-the-road applications. We even made the tire for the moon rover, or designed that for NASA. So Goodyear's a very innovative tire company. If something will improve the performance or the fuel economy or the wear, Goodyear is all over it. That's inside the performance engine. And that's what I call business as usual. The soil has not only been tilled, it's been optimized for, in Goodyear's case, creating tires. In other cases, it's for other products and services. If you want to go beyond that, and I don't know if you can easily see it, but if you want to do business model innovation or new business innovation of some sort, the business as usual, the BAU, won't be enough. You'll need a different set of governing variables, different ways of making decisions, different locus of power, different uses of a channel, operating outside the channel. There will be a number of different priorities, different capabilities, different ways of working. And in fact, the performance engine doesn't like that. And oftentimes, that's where the innovation fails. There are stakeholders for the project, but eventually, sooner or later, they crash up against a set of norms inside the business that are very difficult to change. And they're very difficult to change from the perspective of the project in particular. This is why I think in many respects, innovation is a senior executive function. We saw from Luis's presentation earlier that only in a few of the Fortune 1000 is it deemed that way. I think if you looked at the annual reports of the Fortune 1000, you'd probably find 100% emphasize the importance of innovation. If you looked at the calendars of the CEOs at those companies, I don't think you would find that same dominance, except among the companies that are very successful. There would be more like my son, who said, okay, I get it, and on to the operating attributes. So innovation of the type I'm talking about, which is not the incremental or the faster, better, cheaper, requires some differences. So I'll go back to the parable a little bit. The seed that falls on the path, in this case, is the seed that, or the ideas in a corporation that really hasn't yet reached a gut-level belief that they need them. You know, there is a path, there's a road, there may be a superhighway already running through that corporation. The seeds, if innovation is not felt at a gut level to be important, if it's not something that is worth the time, not just the money and the resources, but the time of the senior leadership, you're going to hit a wall, or it's going to be a very lonely place. I like the loneliness of this photograph. The seed that falls among the thorns are ideas that may have a champion somewhere, and they may grow up and nurture to a certain point with that champion. But if that's an isolated champion, if there's not a shared belief in the importance of this, then if there's not a guiding coalition that can help weed the garden, then you're not going to have progress. And the third are the seeds that fall among the shallow soil or the rocky soil. Those are things that are off strategy. Oftentimes there isn't a growth strategy, so everything's off strategy. If there is a strategy and the innovation resources are focused around that strategy and people are committed to it, there's a much higher chance of success. But a growth strategy is something, oftentimes I think people say, well, throw a lot of ideas out there. We'll see which ones take. We'll see which ones are the best ideas. We'll build our strategy from there. My experience is that just doesn't work. You've got to be very, very lucky for the stars to align for something like that to work. So that means, and I think this was also mentioned earlier by Luis, that if you're going to engage in this kind of innovation, you need to manage organizational change. And in particular, you need to build a sense of urgency, build a guiding coalition, and the vision about where you're going to go. Those are all necessary to overcoming the barriers. So I know we have a limited amount of time here, but I thought it would be useful for people to just talk to the person next to them just for a couple of minutes about these questions. Sort of, first, what types of innovation are you trying to drive in the organization? And are they the types that are going to require organizational change? Or are they the types that can be facilitated by your existing performance engine? And I just think it would be useful, just take 3 minutes, talk to the people at your table about what you're doing and whether it involves change. So I'm going to use a few minutes of time for that. That's okay. I'd like to call everybody's attention back. I'll make a comment first that people, I was standing up here and people were quiet, and then, boom, everybody started talking at once. So obviously, people are very engaged around some of the issues. Is there anyone here who really feels like organizational change is a big part of what they need to do to be successful in their organizations? Do you want to just comment a second about what that means for the group?
Organizational change?
No, what your challenge is and sort of maybe what you're thinking about with respect to it. What are you doing about it?
Well, the organization we have is a $10 billion company with 43,000 people, and it's a medical device company, so we have certain outside influences that keep us, or excuse me, cause people to think that they cannot engage in cultural change. So our organization has this long history of acting in a certain way, and now that we actually have opportunities to act differently under new healthcare regulation things, people don't believe that they can step forward and say, instead of saying, oh my God, we have a medical device tax, oh my God, we have, instead of, and then taking the opportunity to say, oh my, what opportunities does this present us with? And it's the organizational context that has to be changed, in the bloody quarterly result drivers that everybody faces.
I mean, there are a couple interesting comments on what you said. One is that oftentimes that organizational change, there's sort of this two-step where people will say, look, we want innovation, go be innovative. And then the innovation function is supposed to sort of nurture that change. And that's a very difficult thing to do, to push it from the innovation function. You need to try, you need to have the attitude, you need to be open to it, but the belief set's going to come from persistent actions. Does anybody else have just one brief thing they'd like to say? Yeah, go ahead.
We found that we had to actually go outside and form a small team to be able to build some of the opportunities that we discovered, because the competition for existing resources internally was just too great. And we look for, a focus around small POCs, pilots, prototypes, but we need an external team of experts that we can bring in with the skill set that we require to support, whatever that innovation opportunity might be.
So that's sort of a strategy of sort of shunting around the problem, if you can, and which is, I think, great, because at least it gets you moving forward. The challenge, for a lot of companies, is going to be, if you don't have the strong commitment to the need and a strategic space you're operating in, when the dollars get big, the challenges get big. So there's still the need to till the soil even as you're working in parallel to frantically create the opportunity. So I appreciate the comments. It's a very rich topic. There's a lot to do. And I talk with a lot of people whose frustration is, trying to make this an important part of the agenda so that they can be successful for their companies. So that gets me to the, I think I skipped by something. What's required for success? These are from John Cotter, who's a professor in these hallowed halls, for change initiatives, not for innovation initiatives, but just for generic change initiatives. The first 3 steps are creating a sense of urgency. It has to matter. It has to matter at a gut level, not at a PR level. You need to engage a powerful guiding coalition. That's the people who, beyond the Godfather, will stand up and support and help weed the garden so that it can grow. And you need to have a vision. If there's a place you want to get to, and innovation is one of the tools for getting there, there's a much greater chance of sustained support. And my belief is for these kinds of initiatives, these are not nice-to-haves, they're prerequisites. And it's my observation that they don't exist in every company. I'm going to talk about a few companies where I think they do exist, and I'm going to walk through the same slides to do that. But first, this is the place where you need to be a place where innovation matters. And let me just repeat that. If the path you're on is working inside a company, and you're getting the growth you want, and things are going along well, innovation may not matter. It may matter in a long-term sense, but in the guts of the senior executives, it may be a nice-to-have. In some sense, failure may be an option. But there are a few companies where, and some of these examples have been used before, but I'll bring them up. I had the chance to talk to some of the participants around each of these companies to sort of triangulate on the role that the CEO is playing. And the first is Procter & Gamble. And when Lafley came in, he's now written a few books on it, into the CEO role, his purpose in being there was to turn around the growth of the company. The company had been successful, profitable, but the growth had slowed. Something in their traditional innovation engine was no longer working. It was a CEO-level issue. It mattered. Similarly, when Gerstner came into IBM, it was at the height of the e-commerce and the dot-com boom. And he asked the question, we're an IT company. Why didn't we invent web servers? Why didn't we develop search engines? And when they looked in the labs, they had. They just had not commercialized them. It just was not on the agenda of the people who were managing the businesses. So he had an urgent need to figure out how do we make sure that we take advantage of the capability that we have. Another example where it's almost embedded in the DNA of the company is Intel, where Moore's Law provides a constant impetus, as Andy Grove said, a paranoia, creates a paranoia. They had to innovate because they always heard at their backs Moore's Law operating. Those companies establish the importance of innovation, and then you can go to the next stage, which is developing a strong guiding coalition. And it's an interesting thing to me, and I have talked as a result of the journal that I helped to edit with people who are participants, CTOs, people who are part of the innovation function at some of these companies. The CEOs were not just giving the money. They were deeply involved. Lafley at P&G not only had a design guru, but he took design courses. He learned design. He helped teach design. He mandated it. He measured it. The open innovation that they're also, the Connect and Develop program, he set the agendas. He monitored the targets that he had established. So there's an involvement. Similarly, Gerstner set up in the office of IBM, in the office of the CEO, an emerging business opportunities function. He personally pulled people into it. There was someone on the Pitney Bowes board who was in a Harvard Business Case review about this program. His name's Rod Atkins. He was running a 5,000-person organization. He was pulled from that to lead the first emerging business opportunity, whereas he said he had himself and a secretary and the idea that he needed to pursue it. So the deep involvement of the CEO is a critical aspect. And again, it's not a common one. All CEOs will talk about it. Few will spend that degree of their time. And a place where you can nurture new businesses. This is, in my view, the strategy question. Is there a place that you want to go? In the case of P&G, where they wanted to go was to leverage their channel capability and their marketing engine with new products, and the Connect and Develop program helped them do it. At IBM, they wanted to move ultimately into services, and that became the thrust that redefined all the different functions. So in those cases, and I think there's success cases of innovation, all the elements were in place. And so you get your nice growing garden. Each of these things requires changes in those governing principles or the way the company is operating. At P&G, it redefined the role of R&D, for example, and the roles of business leaders in innovation. At IBM, they were entering services, new business segments. Again, it redefined the role of the hardware business. It redefined the role of R&D and the role of researchers who now were out with customers developing new services. I'll skip this in the interest of time. The common factors are that innovation matters, the CEO and or the senior leaders are deeply engaged, and there's a clear growth strategy driving the initiatives. It's not scattershot. There are signs that things might not be working. Is one, it's just not on the agenda. If you have to beg for time, or you're not getting airtime with the senior leaders, that's an issue. If you're noticing that there are political agendas that are able to successfully kill projects, not because they're bad people who are doing it, but because they're trying to preserve what works with the performance engine of the company, that's an indication that you haven't got a strong enough guiding coalition. If the company's getting these businesses sort of sprouting up but never betting to win, that's yet another indication. The ideas are allowed to wither on the vine, and usually that's because there's not a strategic driver for them. Oftentimes what you'll see as sort of subsymptoms is just defer, defer, defer for various reasons. There's more analysis that's required. We need to get greater consensus, so talk to these people or those people. We'll do it, but we have to wait until our short-term pressures are down, all of which are delaying tactics that get in the way. So what can we do from the innovation function? One thing you can do is just you work hard, create the ideas, and pray that somehow the stars are going to align and you're going to hit the market just when everybody wants you to hit the market. This has happened once in my career, so I wouldn't bet on it as an ongoing strategy. It was when I was developing a technology, and it was ready just as there was a strike in the company, and the technology helped alleviate the pressures from the strike. You can try to work on a case-by-case basis. I think this is the most common instance where there's a powerful godfather, somebody who's able to cut the weeds and provide the air cover and so forth. The only problem with this is for the course of some of these things, usually the godfather moves on to another role, and then you're back to square one. You can redefine your goal, and a lot of companies do this. They just say, this breakthrough stuff, this new business stuff is just too much trouble, so I'm not gonna do it. I'll focus on the low-hanging fruit, to use the term that was used before. And the last alternative for you is to engage in change management, learn what it has to do, try to establish the environment within your organization where these items are on the agenda, and that can be a long journey, but it's an important one. I go so far as to say at least new business innovation is change management because it requires setting the new priorities and therefore getting off the beaten path. It requires new ways of working and therefore challenging and redefining roles, which is difficult. It requires exercising, communicating, developing, and operating against new strategies. And without these, ideas are just, seed that gets scattered about. So that's my comments. If there are any questions, if we have time, I'll take a few questions. Yeah,
Jim,
Chris.
let's take a couple questions. We have a couple minutes.
Any comments or questions further from the floor? Okay. Good enough, then the next one.